Hello, Faith Family. I want to welcome you to Life Group and thank you for your involvement in discipleship here at Crosspoint. This past Sunday, we were in Romans 12, 1 through 2. We learned that discipleship is all about transformation. It shapes our thoughts, actions, and character. And this isn't just true for us while we are being led, but also as we lead others. In 2 Corinthians 3, 1 through 6, we get a helpful image of this taking place in the early church. Paul says, "Are we beginning to commend ourselves again, or do we need, as some do, letters of recommendation to you or from you? You yourselves are our letters of recommendation, written on our hearts to be known and read by all. And you show that you are a letter from Christ delivered by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Such is the confidence that we have through Christ toward God. Not that we are sufficient in ourselves to claim anything as coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God, who has made us sufficient to be ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life." I love this timeless metaphor that Paul is presenting in verses 1 through 3. We're always looking for ways to qualify ourselves and others. Whether it's our doctor, our contractor, lawyer, mechanic, we want to know that the people we're working with and are depending on are legit. And we want to communicate to others that we are qualified in the work that we do. Up to this point in the letter, Paul has been sort of contrasting himself against false teachers that have made their way into the church in Corinth. So he's offering a qualification for himself that he is indeed a minister of the true gospel in the form of a letter of recommendation. This is probably not a new concept for you, and Paul himself would send letters of recommendation to churches on behalf of other church leaders. But this isn't a usual letter of recommendation. Paul reveals that the members of the church of Corinth, who he has led to Christ and discipled, are themselves his letter of recommendation. They are a living testament to the work of God. I believe we find here a beautiful representation of the discipleship process and how it transforms the lives of both the disciple and the disciple maker. God is the author, the disciple maker is the instrument God uses, and those that are discipled are what's written. Paul is saying, my qualification is in the work of the Holy Spirit. That work is evident in the lives that are being transformed into the image of Christ. One thing that is interesting to me is the wording in verse 2. Paul says that they are letters written on our hearts, referring, I believe, to himself and those that would have traveled with him on the missionary journey. One thing that is interesting to me is the wording in verse 2. Paul says that they are letters written on our hearts, referring, I believe, to himself and those that would have traveled with him on his missionary journey. This shows us what the transformation of the disciple maker looks like. A deep affection grew in Paul for those that the Spirit led to Jesus through his work. Paul writes about this often in his letters to the early church. In Philippians 1, 3 through 5, he says, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making my prayer with joy because of our partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Being the vessel by which the Spirit moves to bring about transformation is a privilege. We get a front row seat to the amazing work that only God can do. It also serves as confirmation for you in the work that you are doing, as well as the power that is at work in you. Throughout this passage, we get a comparison made between physical writing and spiritual writing, between ink and the Spirit of God, between tablets of stone and tablets of human hearts. This is a clear comparison being made between Old Testament law delivered on tablets and written down, and the law as delivered by Christ. It's not that the two contradict each other. Jesus himself said, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. But the law written on tablets is external. It tells us how we fall short, but gives us no means by which to live our lives in obedience. So God now writes the law on our hearts so that we are changed in our innermost being. We can see throughout the Old Testament that this was really the plan all along. For example, Ezekiel 11, 19 through 20 says, and I will give them one heart and a new spirit I will put within them. I will remove the heart of stone from their flesh and give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my rules and obey them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. Verses 4 through 6 in our passage from 2 Corinthians tells us that Paul knows the true source of his life change. It isn't him. It's God working through him. It's not his education, his resume, his skill sets. He has said before in past letters, he has those bragging rights under his belt if that's what he wanted his life to be about. But all that is worthless in comparison to what God has done. It's the work of God that first took place in his own heart. God makes us sufficient to be disciple makers. Our lack of knowledge or experience are not valid excuses for neglecting to engage in the discipleship process. God was transforming lives all around. He changed the hearts of the Corinthians through Paul, and he transformed Paul to be the person that would lead them to Christ. So let's ask ourselves as we go into group discussion, how are we taking part in the discipleship process? Are we being led? Are we intentionally leading others? And what might be holding us back?